Ukraine has found an economic pressure point that could do more damage to Russia than any single missile strike this year. Wildberries, the online retailer used by up to 90% of Russia's economically active population. Since early August, Ukrainian drones have destroyed at least a dozen of the company's warehouses, wiped out an estimated $3.5 billion in seller stock, forced Russian state banks toward a bailout, and pushed prices on the platform up by as much as 30%. This isn't collateral damage. It's a deliberate strategy to crack open Russia's economy from the inside, and here's exactly how it's working. Ukraine just keeps picking those wildberries. The warehouses and logistics infrastructure of Russia's largest online retailer keep burning as drone after drone rains down on them. The company's CEO is furious. The Russian entrepreneurs who depend on the platform and the customers buying from it are even angrier. Putin is worried, and he should be, because these strikes go far beyond wrecking one e-commerce giant. They've become the catalyst for something nobody expected, a real shot at cracking Russia's economy wide open. We start in Ryazan. In this city, only a couple hundred kilometers from Moscow, sat the fifth largest logistics hub in the entire Wildberries network. Sat because it isn't there anymore. The hub, part of a massive network belonging to a company often called Russia's version of Amazon, now lies in ruins after a devastating Ukrainian drone strike tore through it. Black smoke rose over the warehouse after the attack, which was powerful enough to blow through the roof and even ignite a nearby oil refinery. Emergency crews evacuated employees, and casualties were reported. But the real headline for Ukraine was the cost: millions, possibly billions of dollars wiped out in an attack designed as part of a larger strategy to paralyze a gray market giant that plays a far bigger role in Russia's war economy than Putin will ever admit. What happened in Ryazan has been happening across Russia. Wildberries facilities keep going down, one after another. The exact numbers shift depending on the source, but the pattern holds. On August 2nd, Technology.org reported Ukraine had successfully struck 11 of Wildberries' 25 Russian warehouses. The new Voice of Ukraine put the figure at 12, likely counting a later strike on a facility in Russia's Vladimir region on August 3rd. That outlet also noted the Vladimir strike meant Ukraine had now hit 12 of the company's 15 largest warehouses, suggesting a deliberate strategy of taking out the biggest facilities first before working down the list. And it's already continuing. On August 4th came another round of attacks, this time hitting 2 Wildberries warehouses, along with another logistics site reportedly tied to the company's network near Moscow. This round striking facilities in the Tver and St. Petersburg regions. That second strike will rattle Putin personally. St. Petersburg is his hometown, one of the crown jewels of Russia, supposedly among the best defended cities in the entire country. None of that mattered on August 4th, since nothing seemed to be in place protecting the city's Wildberries warehouse. And even while this story was coming together, more strikes kept landing. August 5th brought attacks on Wildberries warehouses in Tatarstan and Tula, producing the same results seen for weeks now. Massive fires, columns of smoke, and untold quantities of goods destroyed before they ever reached a Wildberries customer. By the time this reaches you, Ukraine may have carried out even more strikes. The full damage tally keeps shifting because more warehouses keep burning. On August 4th, Anadolu Agency estimated potential losses to Wildberries sellers had already reached as high as $3.5 billion. None of it reimbursed by the company. Wildberries has spent roughly $500,000 on compensation so far, though that money went specifically to the families of people injured or killed in the strikes. That mention of casualties opens up a genuine gray area. Russia will argue that civilians are dying in these strikes, and that's exactly the line pushed by Wildberries CEO Tatiana Bakalchuk, Russia's richest woman and an outspoken Putin supporter. In a statement that reads less like a rebuttal and more like a desperate plea for Ukraine to stop, she argued that attackers were disguising their real motives by falsely accusing the company of selling military goods, insisting that anyone could check a global marketplace like Amazon or Alibaba and see nothing different on offer there, and that there was no logic or rationality behind the strikes at all. A few problems with that. There's nothing alleged about the military goods sold on Wildberries. It's been happening for years, and here's exactly how deep that goes. Kiev Post ran a detailed investigation into what Wildberries actually sells, published right around the time Ukraine's strikes began. Before the strikes, a simple search for drone on the platform turned up a huge selection, including Mavic 3 and Mavic 4 models that are trivially converted into FPV strike drones. Plenty of quadcopters were also explicitly labeled FPV, an unmistakable signal aimed at soldiers using these exact drones at the front. Dig a little deeper, and you could find payload release mechanisms and bomb drop hardware for these same drones, often tucked away under vague categories like electronics or auto parts. And in the clothing section, tactical gear wasn't hard to find either. Chest rigs worn over body armor, designed to carry rifle magazines. There was even a dedicated category for the special military operation itself, so no, there's nothing alleged about any of this. And the comparison to Amazon and Alibaba falls apart on its own terms, since neither operates inside Russia, and regardless of what they sell, neither is actively bankrolling Putin's invasion. We're using the past tense on the product listings deliberately, because Wildberries has been working hard to scrub these items from its storefront, presumably to prop up the CEO's narrative that Ukraine's accusations lack proof. On July 26th, the Kyiv Independent reported that military goods on Wildberries are now being hidden from search results. The listings are still technically there. The company has just made them harder to find. Specifically, Wildberries started blacklisting search terms like SVO, the Russian abbreviation for the Special Military Operation. Before the strikes, searching everything for the SVO returned over 200,000 results, according to the Moscow Times. Now it returns nothing. But there's a catch. All Wildberries really did was blacklist the abbreviation itself. According to United 24 Media, every product that would have shown up under those old searches is still available. You just need different search terms to find it. The outlet cites a Russian media outfit called Bear Grow, which proved the point by locating helmets explicitly marked tested in the SVO using alternate keywords, and the blacklisting barely even works as intended, since searches for SVO goods, SVO supplies, and SVO accessories still return plenty of results. The products are still there. They can still be found and bought, mostly the same as before, except now a lot of what used to be for sale is sitting as ash in the ruins of burned-out warehouses, courtesy of Ukraine. There's a clear military logic behind these strikes, which directly contradicts the claim that none exists. But it runs deeper still, to the point where clearing military hardware off the market almost feels like a bonus rather than the actual goal. For Ukraine, the real prize is what these strikes are triggering inside Russia's broader economy, and the mechanism behind that is worth walking through in detail. Wildberries matters far more to Russia's economy than the Kremlin would ever want to admit. Remember, this is essentially Russia's version of Amazon, and like Amazon, it functions as a hub for tens of thousands of business owners who depend on the platform for sales and on its warehouses for storing and shipping everything their customers buy. By July 29th, roughly 10% of the company's total warehouse space, along with the stock inside it, had already been destroyed in Ukrainian strikes. That figure is certainly higher now, given how relentlessly the attacks have continued. Sellers are already buckling under the losses. One vendor told the BBC she'd lost nearly $13,000 worth of stock in a single strike, and another put it bluntly, saying they're already getting hit from every direction as it is. For enormous numbers of Russians, Wildberries is their income, their source for everyday goods, and one of their key lifelines in a war that has suddenly arrived at their own front door. None of this personal economic pain is accidental. Ukraine wants to inflict it. Unlike Russia, Ukraine doesn't target civilians directly with its drone campaign. What it can do is strike militarily relevant infrastructure that also happens to serve civilians, and Wildberries fits squarely into that category. Damage a load-bearing pillar of the Russian economy, and the people who depend on that pillar get angry, potentially angry enough to start demanding Putin end this war. Sellers are taking real losses as more warehouses burn. That $3.5 billion in destroyed stock represents money sellers will never make, money that could have gone toward growing their businesses, hiring staff, or simply covering everyday expenses for Russians who depend on this platform to make a living. According to Medusa, Wildberries has recently begun offering some compensation to affected sellers, but not much. Only small companies and individual entrepreneurs have received anything at all, and what they've gotten covers only a fraction of what they actually lost. As time passes, a growing number of Russia's small businesses are heading toward collapse from pure cash flow strain. As for buyers, the laws of supply and demand don't care about anyone's feelings. Imagine Amazon losing a chunk of its warehouses to fire, taking inventory with it. Supply craters, and suddenly that $10 item you were about to buy costs $20. In an August 1st report, Kyiv Post revealed that prices on Wildberries had already jumped between 10 and 30%. That's inflation moving at speed, and it's only going to accelerate as more locations go down to Ukrainian drones. Vendors selling through Wildberries are scrambling to cover rising costs however they can, canceling discounts, switching to cheaper shipping options. Wildberries itself has started pulling back the discount programs it once subsidized to keep customers on the platform, even as it bleeds billions from the ongoing attacks. What Ukraine appears to have stumbled onto here might be one of the most unexpected pressure points of the entire war. DW News points out that Wildberries functions as a genuine choke point for a massive portion of the Russian economy, and it's also a company carrying roughly $10 billion in debt, sustainable only because Russia's state-owned banks back it. That's where the direct link to Putin's war chest comes in. If Putin wants to keep Wildberries afloat, and given its impact on ordinary Russian lives, he probably has to. He'll need to order the banks to bail it out. That money has to come from somewhere, and it's the exact same pool of resources Russia relies on to fund the war. And if Putin chooses not to intervene, he risks a full domino effect. Wildberries collapses, the businesses of its sellers follow, and consumers already squeezed by supply shortages watch their remaining options jack up prices as a major competitor crumbles to dust. It's a lose-lose position for Putin, exactly as Ukraine intended. It looks like Putin and Russia's state banking system have already made their choice. In a July 29th report, CNBC revealed the Kremlin has effectively acknowledged it will likely need to step in and prop up Wildberries while the strikes continue, with state-controlled VTB expected to play a central role in what amounts to a bailout funded by Russian taxpayers. Other banks, including Sberbank, have already announced loan restructuring programs aimed at Wildberries vendors, worried that losing more warehouses could trigger a wave of bankruptcies that would leave the bank holding thousands of bad loans. An August 4th report from Global Data added that the Kremlin is now exploring further support programs for vendors for the same underlying reasons. Several options are reportedly on the table, allowing sellers to suspend loan repayments for up to a year, the restructuring already mentioned, and subsidized working capital loans through state-backed microfinance institutions, essentially more loans stacked on top of loans vendors already can't repay. The Kremlin is scrambling, and every passing day makes the math worse, because Ukraine's drones simply aren't stopping. Ukraine has effectively opened an entirely new front in this war, one confined to Russian territory itself. This is an assault on logistics, combining the destruction of dual-use military hardware with sustained economic pressure on vendors, buyers, and banks alike. RBC Ukraine notes that the median revenue for a Wildberries vendor sits at just $7,500, leaving very little financial cushion. A week or two of disruption is enough to push a huge share of these small business owners into negative cash flow, and that's happening right now. All of this lands at possibly the worst moment for Russia, which is already navigating a rocky economic stretch that exposes just how costly Putin's decision to reorient the entire economy around the military-industrial complex has been. In a July 13th report, before the Wildberries strikes even began, Forbes described Russia's economy as slowly sinking. Russia's own 2026 projections put growth at just 0.4%, edging the country toward the brink of recession, and that's the optimistic version. Forbes also reports that Putin's war will likely run at least $28 billion over budget in 2026, with that overage climbing by another $54 billion in both 2027 and 2028. The only reason Russia isn't in even worse shape right now is that the war in Iran has given oil prices a temporary lift. Losing Wildberries, or having to spend billions propping it up, only piles onto that pressure. Will the destruction of Wildberries' warehouses alone be enough to bring down the Russian economy? No, but it's one more piece locking into place in a larger puzzle Ukraine is assembling, and it directly undercuts the CEO's claim that none of this makes sense. It makes plenty of sense. She built her company on Putin's economy, and now that economy's biggest weakness has become her problem too. There's one more layer worth mentioning briefly. Ukraine wants this economic chaos to translate into public anger, turning against Putin himself, not just financial pain for its own sake. That psychological dimension is a story in itself. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next.